My goodness, what a pleasure to be here. It's so lovely to be here, my 5th time in Istanbul, and so happy to see the smiling faces in the audience. So, as Kellen mentioned, I'm a fellow at Autodesk, and I'm part of an organization called OCTO. It stands for the Office of the CTO. And our 150 people are the pathfinders, or among the pathfinders within Autodesk. So we explore emerging technologies, we explain those technologies to our customers as well as to ourselves, and we exploit those technologies, or we apply them to a vast range of new possibilities. So we are using machine learning, as Callan mentioned, and generative design, and synthetic biology, metadata visualization. And what I'd like to share with you today are some projects that we've been working on, some early trends that will, I think, change the way in which we design and make things. And it's not so much the projects I want you to think about. What I'd love for you to think about is the shift that is taking place. What is the shift in the way in which we relate to technology? And the punchline, or the conclusion, really is that technology, our relationship with it, is moving from working with a passive servant to an active, creative partner. And that shift has amazing implications. So let's start. Let's think through this together. In many ways, the ideas that we produce in the world have always depended on some type of fuel. And in the industrial age, that fuel was coal, right? So coal was enabled us to heat up water, turning it into steam, and that steam drove engines that created steel and generated a brand new world for us. A world of railways and a world of telegraphs, a world that was really the first connected world. Today, as Kellen mentioned, we have a brand new fuel, and that fuel is data. Data is the commodity, and the cloud is the pipeline. It's the combination of data and literally infinite, abundant computing. That's kind of a mix. Abundant, infinite computing that is this new energy that is unleashing, I guess, a kind of magic. And so you already know this. I mean, our lives are already transformed by the cloud and by this incredible computation that's available. It's changing the way in which we meet, changing the way in which we travel, changing the way in which we are entertained. So it's the combination of these emerging technologies that are changing how we make things, who makes things, and the very nature of what we make. The shift is dramatic and it is irreversible. We are moving from a time where our designs are going to be locked in front of the screen. We're moving from a time when our designs are static or immobile to a time when our products will become much more alive. They will go into the world and they will adapt and they will interact with the environment and the people that will operate the tools that we make, the things that you make. And at the heart of this, let's turn that sound, is the ability to capture, compute, and create. And so I'd like to explain what that actually looks like in some detail. So let's begin with our first example. What happens when we can apply literally infinite computing power to generative design? So the shift is going from the time in which we direct every stage of the computation, from tools that you directed, mouse click by mouse click, step by step, touch by touch, into one that is reversed. We used to go from pressing a button to design to create a simulation after a design. And then we can simulate during a design, but now with generative design, we can simulate to discover the design, to discover alternatives. The shift is that we're now able to describe the problems and then the constraints, and then allow the computer to understand the forces at play to discover what's possible. So it creates this enormous solution space. Now, I really love this photograph here. It's of a chair. It's made by a 25-year-old intern. It was her very first time making a chair. In fact, it was the very first time using CAD software. In fact, what she did is she described the goals, okay, so what was the height of the chair, what's the material it needs to be out of, and some constraints, and then had 10,000 selections to choose from. And then she produced, using robotics, this rather remarkable chair. So that's just the start of it, right? It's more than just understanding the geometry. We can now generate solutions to address much more nuanced problems, such as the needs of people. So our team in Toronto, which is my hometown, has moved into a new building. We actually moved in last Tuesday, and we're using the building as a kind of living experiment. So our goal is to maximize the productivity of people working and also to maximize their happiness, how much access they can have to their colleagues and their friends, how much daylight they can see. So we used generative design and we fed in the drivers of productivity and of happiness and surveyed every employee, over 300 employees, to find out how they would like to work. Do they like to work closed? Do they like to work in an open office? Do they like to have access to the sunlight? Do they like to have lots of monitors surrounding them? And the computer took all of that input, all of that data, and generated not one, not a dozen, not 100, but as you'll soon see, many, many thousands of alternatives. And it tried to minimize the distractions and maximize the outside views and then to prioritize personal relationships. And this is what it looks like. It's really gorgeous. If you're ever in Toronto, please come visit us. I think you'll be delighted. And there's some wonderful surprises that emerged from it. So you're not just stuck with the very first good idea, but instead, in a truly creative process, you explore the best possible range of ideas. It's the design process. So the shift that is occurring is we're moving from directed to adaptive, from one in which you click every single option to one in which you let go and allow the computer to do some of this work for you. What would that feel like for you in your work, in your designs? Okay, let's go further. What about if we can apply computational power to robotic systems? Transforming the way in how we make things. Now, robots really haven't changed very much in the last 30 years, and nor has their environment. They are dangerous, they are expensive, they are heavy, they are stupid, and they will kill you if you happen to get too close because they don't see. So as a result, we lock them up in these cells, which can actually be more expensive than the robots themselves. So what if and as a result of that, we have to adapt to the way in which the robot actually works. So instead of responding to us, we respond to them. And if you think about it, that's kind of dumb. What if we flipped the whole thing around and had our computers be much more intelligent? So I'd like to introduce you to Ash. Ash, meet Istanbul, Istanbul meet Ash. Ash is kind of like a regular robot, except we don't lock her up in a cell. So we've given Ash the power to see with clear stereoscopic vision and the power to weld in three-dimensional space. So she doesn't rely on us for direction. Instead, she works in a closed loop system to self-correct as she prints. A little bit this way, a little bit that way, kind of like we would do it. And so as we give more flexibility into Ash, we need better ways to interact with her. So we've developed a virtual reality system where you take the goggles and you put them in and enter into Ash's world. And as you work into Ash's world, you can interact not with a keyboard or with a click, but with your body, physically, interacting with her, with the way in which she prefers to work. And that is an amazing experience, I got to tell you, to be able to interact safely with a 2.5-ton robot, directing her to do what you would like to have done. So what that means is that the space in which we occupy and program and interact with her is no longer dangerous, and we don't need all of that extra stuff. So the shift here is we're moving from a rigid way of working with fixed rules to a fluid way of working, which is much more dynamic, much more the way, well, much more human, much the way we would work. Okay, another example. What happens when we apply infinite computing power to additive manufacturing? Now, we're familiar now. 3D printing has become very popular. You might be familiar with some of the work that we've done with Airbus to produce this partition panel, a part of the plane, making it lighter and stronger than before. Now, what you might not know is that we used an algorithm derived from a slime mold, an organism called Ficerum, to drive the design. And so we studied Ficerum, and the way it works is it produces a very dense network of connections to find its food, and it reinforces the good connections, and it prunes the less important connections. So to design the partition, we used the algorithm that models the logic of Ficerum. So what it produces is this remarkable, complex, organic structure. And it's something that you can hold in your hands. It's beautiful, it's complicated, but you can't hold it in your head because it's so complicated. So our traditional design tools can simulate relatively simple things and understand their performance, whereas more complicated things are, well, very difficult to understand. So here, this represents another shift. We're moving from a world that is inspectable to a world that is inscrutable. So what does the word inscrutable mean? So like the word itself, it means hard to understand. It's all kind of wrapped up and tangled together. So the things that we are making as a result of machine learning themselves are becoming less understandable. More on that in a moment. So this partition here illustrates the power of generative design. This chair represents the fact that technology is becoming more democratized and anyone can do this, quite literally. And thirdly, we're now being able to address more and more complicated problems, ones in which computers weren't able to address before. And at the center of this, of course, is data and computation. And there's a shift that's occurring. And as you start to think about it, one thinks, well, what does this mean for me? I mean, as a designer and as an engineer, isn't that what I do? And now a computer is doing it. Doesn't that mean that's going to replace my job, what I studied for, my core competency, who I am? And the answer is no. It can augment and reinforce, but it does mean that there's going to be a shift. And the shift is moving from just the detailed calculations, which is what a computer is really good at, to one about clarifying the needs and the goals and the nuance and the potential impact. So, in this future world that is being developed in virtually every industry, we are entering a world of black boxes. Black boxes because the algorithms and the outputs are becoming less understandable. But because they're less understandable doesn't mean they're less trustworthy or reliable. Machine learning is now better at recognizing faces or detecting cancer or driving cars. This is not a self-driving car, just to let you know. This is a human-driven car. So the shift that's occurring in the underlying technology, as Callan alluded to, is that we're moving from formulas to understanding direct observation, from calculation to insight. And so, like self-driving cars, these new technologies are they're predictive, they're productive, and they're projective. They look out into the world. The old way of working works with if-then statements. It's kind of like a conditional. You're looking back behind you in a rear-view mirror. The new generative design tools look forwards and outwards into the world. Okay? So that shift is changing the direction or the trajectory of the use of our technology. They learn from it. So we're moving to a world of conditional to insightful, okay? To really understanding the essence. Let's go back to robots. Now, robots, because we can give them computer vision, we give them the ability to see, they are no longer blind to our physical presence. And by giving them machine learning, they are able to understand, and they're no longer blind to our processes. And so the combination of learning and seeing means that they are able to adapt to a very messy real world. So I'd like to introduce you to another robot. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Bishop. He's in a robot lab in Pier 9 in San Francisco. And we introduced Bishop to the very, very disorderly world of Lego blocks. So we gave Bishop the ability to manipulate, to see as well, and also curiosity, all right? So he came to understand that he can pick up blocks, move them, and place them, and began to understand some of the fundamental actions that, say, your toddler has. And so he developed this basic ability to interact. Oh, by the way, no robots are noisy. We haven't been able to fix that yet. And so we gave him the ability to interact with more complicated, messy views, so understanding, and so manipulating individual components out of a vast range. So as you're seeing here, it's a kind of slow process. So what if we could speed up that process? So how would we do that? Well, the way in which we did that is change his robotic vision, so he's not looking into the real world, but looking into a kind of simulation that has real-world physical properties, like looking into a video game. And within this video game, he could learn. We separated the physical environment from the learning environment. And in doing so, we could work in computer time, 4 times faster, and accelerate his learning with more examples. Hundreds, thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of examples. A lifetime, 100 lifetimes worth of experience, so that Bishop has a deep understanding of what Lego blocks actually looks like. And the thing about this is that once a Bishop understands the skill, so does Ash, and so do any other robot. That's amazing. Once one robot understands something, that knowledge can be transferred, that deep knowledge, unlike humans. We still need to go through a learning process. Here, the learning can be transferred. Okay. So let that sink in for a moment, the fact that it can learn in computer time faster than ever before, and then we can now, or in the process of experimenting with other practices. Once you have a Lego algorithm, it becomes relatively easy to start applying it to other things. So imagine looking at this stage here and then rearranging the chairs. So a empowered robot would be able to create a wall, would be able to stack them up, or look into a bunch of dirt and bricks and sticks lying on the ground and some nails, and you could ask it, build me a chair, build me a partition wall, build me whatever. Are you seeing the potential and the shift that machine learning has for us? It's really quite dramatic, and we're at the very early stages of this. It's really quite incredible. So the shift here that we just to summarize is moving from a world of conformity, where we have to conform and narrow our technology, to one of variability, okay, where the computer can respond to the emerging technologies. Next topic, simulation. So if we could teach a robot to work with Lego blocks, can we teach it how to use software? So that's another one of our experiments. So we took an approach with Maya. I had the good fortune of working on Maya in Toronto 20 years ago. And Maya is a super complicated program, as so many other programs are. But to become an expert, you can spend months and sometimes years even just working on one particular part, such as simulation. There are dozens and dozens of sliders, and to be able to simulate just about, in this case, fluid dynamics, any kind of smoke or tendrils of water. What if we could teach the computer to recognize what settings to move to create the desired effect? So we've been training it with reference photography like this one here, and then the computer then figures out what dials to move to create the effect. What that means for any designer is that the learning curve has dramatically shrunk. And so people can produce expert results in much less time. Another example is our work with Moldflow. Now, Moldflow is a software application that has 10,000 materials in it, and it has analyzed and studied the properties of melting points and how plastic flows. And it's a database that's taken 30 years to generate. Now, it's a slow physical process to be able to test this, and to be honest, only 1/3 third of the database is actually complete. So we are using machine learning now to anticipate and to judge and to fill out the neural database. So we can't do this physically, we just don't have enough time, and new materials are continually being added on. But in computer time, working in simultaneous sessions, we'll be able to complete this database much more quickly. So the shift here is we're moving from a world of calculation, and you're familiar with this, to one that's based on intuition. Well, that's a big shift. What is intuition? Well, intuition, personally, is that feeling that you know something is right and you can't quite describe why it's right. But it's a felt sense of certainty of the way something could be or should be or will be. And that's what advanced computation is doing, transforming calculation into intuition. Let me show you some other examples. This is my last large example. We have a project called Project IQ. It's part of the BIM 360 family. And it uses real-world construction data to analyze what could be, building on intuition. So we fed it 27 million issues or problems from a global BIM database. And this is just a small portion of it. And IQ takes that data and uses machine learning to predict upcoming issues, high-risk issues, project subcontractor risk, and really help superintendents to be much more effective. So the supers at one of our customers, Swinnerton Construction, has used IQ to be able to do everything from check weather forecast and manage their construction much more efficiently. And the way it's currently being used is that you type in the issue. You see something, and then you type it in onto a tablet, and the computer will add that to its database. What we're working on now is to use reasoning to photographs. So, for example, look at this photograph here, and ask yourself, what could be wrong? And if you see it's a little moist underneath, that means that the window might be improperly fitted, which is then going to create further issues. Okay? So an expert will be able to recognize this, and we're training computers to do this. Or look at this one here. Anything wrong? Well, it turns out there's some places where there isn't a full fence in the scaffolding. Another safety issue. Or what about a particular contractor track record? The contractor might be terrific on one kind of project, but not so good on another kind of project. So using the database analysis, we can anticipate what could be some issues. So again, think of it this way. So instead of looking at project management through a rear view mirror, looking backwards using if-then statements, we look outwards and forwards into what we actually see. So it uses machine learning to augment what are the potential issues so that we can manage the projects much more effectively. So when we're using a vast range of new types of input, more data to make these systems smarter, more effective, and even more intuitive to help you do your work. So we're moving from recipe, formulas, to reasoning. So just as we need to let go of the wheel of a self-driving car to really fully realize its potential, we are now entering a phase where we have to let go of some of our tools, allowing, directing every single step of them to do what they are doing best, to help them realize their great potential. We're moving from a world of limited computation, and in this world, our designs would stay in the box, and in fact, we would sell our software in the boxes. We're not doing that anymore. Because in this old world, this traditional world of computation, this phase that we're moving out of, the qualities of computation have the qualities that you see on the left. Directed, rigid, inspectable, and so on. Now imagine another world where computation is truly at your fingertips, where your cell phone, your tablet, other devices are connected to a new fuel of unlimited data and a new fuel of unlimited computation. In this world, computation is ever-present and abundant. It's the only commodity in the corporate world globally that has dropped in price and is continuing to drop in price exponentially, and that will continue well into the future. So our tools will be continually connected and emerging. And what is emerging are these new fluid characteristics of adaptive, fluid, inscrutable, insightful, variable, intuitive, and reasoning. So we're creating a world where we're emerging from a world where we're bringing together both of, well, in fact, both parts of our brains, both parts of ourselves. We are now producing tools that are not only able to represent information and our designs, but can comprehend them. And so we're making the shift from a passive partner to an active, creative, intelligent, brilliant assistant. And at Autodesk, we are in the process of designing these tools, and we're giving them the quality of a true design partner, the partner that you truly want to have in your technology. And it's excelling not just at execution, but also at exploration and thinking. So together, bringing these two worlds, we think that we can bring out the very best in each of them, and I think here we have the possibility, as a result of this, to truly make anything. Thank you.
Good job.